Alright, howdy folks. Welcome back to the Squirtle Squad YouTube channel here, dedicated to the Gym Leader Challenge format of the Pokemon TCG card game. And so here what I'm going to do is go over my day 2 results at the Pokemon 2026 Regional in Indianapolis, Indiana at the end of May. And for those of you that don't know, there were two different formats for the Gym Leader Challenge at the regional, one of which was a scheduled event that you could pre-buy into, and that today started at 1:30 on Saturday. And then there were a number of pods that would fire ad hoc as soon as there were 4 or more players. Today I did both of those, which was fantastic for my day, and I was able to do both the 3 rounds of the scheduled event as well as a round robin with 4 other participants. Today I played exclusively the grass deck shown here, and I ended up going 50-50 or 500 with a 3-3 win-loss record. So ultimately I was pretty happy with that, given that this deck does a little bit better against some of the basic heavy format decks, especially the the fighting decks, especially those that might be weak to the grass type. And today I actually encountered 0 of those, which was quite impressive given how much orange was on the board both yesterday and today. And so what I'll do is take you through this deck a little bit and then explain to you the record that I had for the day. So right up, there are a bunch of Pokemon in this deck. Some of the mainstays here are the Meganium, which is the more recent one from the Mega Evolutions. This thing doubles the grass energy attached to your Pokemon with that wild growth ability there. And so that makes each basic a grass energy count as 2. The other key one here is the Rillaboom, and this thing has the voltage beat ability, which will let you search your deck for 2 different grass energy and attach them to one of your Pokemon. And so what's really nice about that voltage beat is it allows you to accelerate energy from deck, and there aren't too many abilities that let you do that, but it's also accelerating not 1 but 2. And then the third critical line here is the Turtwig Grottle Torterra, and this one is really a double whammy. The Grottle itself with that Sun-Drenched Shell ability is fantastic to let you search your deck for any grass Pokemon once per turn, so that's fantastic. And then the Torterra is an absolute beefcake as a stage 2 with a base 190 hit points, and the Evo Press does 50 damage for each evolution Pokemon in play, which in this deck can be up to 200. But the really great thing about the Evo Press attack is it can be used for a single energy attack if it is combined with the Wild Growth, and the Hammer In can be used for up to 2 grass energy, assuming that you have the Meganium in play. And what's really nice about that Hammer In is, again, you can combine that with the Rillaboom to attach those 2 grass energy, which is then doubled by the Meganium directly from deck once per turn. And so that makes this awesome once it gets fully established. Now, the other Pokemon that are in this deck are the Zarude, and so this guy is here to help you with that pack call attack early in the game, which is designed to let you help set up so you can search your deck for a grass Pokemon. But it can also, if it's your first turn and you're going second and you're lucky and you get to start this guy along with the grass energy, you in principle can search your deck for up to 3 different grass energy or 3 different grass Pokemon, which is fantastic. The other one I have in here, which is a kind of subtle unit, so I think a lot of people play the other Shaman, which has the bench barrier ability, which is the more recent one. But this one, that Flippity Flap, I think is fantastic early game to help you establish your board state. So the number of times I get to go second, can buddy pop in for the Shaman or get the Shaman into the active, and then use the Flippity Flap ability there or Flippity Flap attack to get going and help me establish my hand. So if I get, stuck mid-game too, that's a nice way to get out of it because there's no on-board draw support with this deck. So that sometimes is a last resort. At least twice today, I was able to start that Flippity Flap attack and get established because of that. The other thing that's kind of the secret here with the Shaman is it is a rally back attack, and so if one of your Pokemon were knocked out, you can attack for kind of a revenge attack for 120. Again, it's 2 energy as a basic, but again, if you have the Meganium in play, it's only 1 attachment from hand to be able to revenge attack, and so that makes it really nice as a basic that you can revenge attack. The other one is the Tapu Bulu, and this thing, like if this thing works correctly, is absolutely the workhorse of the deck. So the way I'd like to do it is you use, let's say your opponent knocks out the top of blow. So then I use Super Rod. With the Super Rod, put top of blow, plus 2 grass energy back in the deck. Use Grottle to put the top of blue back on the bench. Use Rillaboom's Voltage Beat to attach 2 grass energy to him. Switch him to the active, and then take advantage of the Wild Growth ability off the Meganium. And those 2 grass energy that I attacked with the Rillaboom then end up being all 4 energy required to use the Wood Hammer attack. And so in principle, you can just cycle this guy all the way back around. And so that's also nice with, so there's 2 rods in here that help you do that. If this guy just continuously swings for 220, it's going to be a really good day for you. But to be able to do that and chain it and cycle it, you do have to have all 3 of these set up, which is kind of tough. All right, now the actual MVP of the deck, and this is the super secret spicy sauce, is the Toadstool. That slime mold colony there prevents your opponent from putting any cards from their discard pile directly into their hand. Now, that by itself might seem innocuous, but I want to mention here in the Gym Leader Challenge format the number of different cards that are completely blocked by that. So, Tulip, Clara, Lana's Aid, Tarragon, Versa Seeker, Cynthia and Caitlin, Night Stretcher, Rescue Stretcher, and the list goes on. So the number of ways people are recovering directly from the discard pile to the hand is quite large. And a lot of the most common meta-played cards are completely blocked by this thing. And so the ability to nerf your opponent's recovery all the way with that slime molded colony makes this, I think, the absolute secret sauce of the deck. And it's something that I'm surprised is not present in more grass decks. This thing is absolutely busted, and it's very useful. All right, so other than these Pokemon, there's a variety of things. I've got 8 basic energy. Forest of Vitality is synergizing with Turffield Stadium and Artisan. If you're not familiar here with my layout, I go Pokemon, Pokemon Search, Draw Support, or Search Supporters, other support cards, Recovery, Tools, Other Stadiums, and Energy with Special Energy on the side. This is how I always lay out and think about my Gym Leader Challenge decks, and it just kind of helps me count how many cards there are. Certain cards like Kofu might seem very counterintuitive because it's not the world's most powerful draw Pokemon, but if you do end up with a couple of energy in your hand and you want to voltage beat for them, you don't want to throw these away, and there aren't that many ways where you want to shuffle into your deck and randomly draw out. The goal is to put these 2 under your deck on the bottom, draw 4 off Kofu, and then use the voltage beat to put those 2 that you put on the bottom of the deck directly onto the board. Other things like that, Avery is particularly powerful. Again, because of that Toadstool ability, it's really going to force your opponent, if they have a full bench, to discard some Pokemon. And if you're blocking their recovery, you can really nerf them with the Avery. In principle, I would love to be able to play Parallel City with this deck as well, but unfortunately, both the Turffield Stadium, the Forest of Vitality are very powerful stadiums for grass, and so you don't want to necessarily bump one of these 2 with that Avery card. Other things like Redeemable Ticket, I'm going to have a separate video here on manipulating your prizes, and a lot of those lessons learned were in this deck, because what's nice about this one is if you pull out all the critical Pokemon and you've got 1 or 2 of them prized, you can play Redeemable Ticket, shuffle those back under, and you're not forfeiting anything else from your deck because you've already sucked out all of the important Pokemon from the deck. So that's an important piece there. Muscle Band is critical in here because with the Tapu Blows, 220 in damage, you're going to be going 220 plus 20. That gets you to 240. So that's a Whale Lord knockout. So that's very important math to be aware of. The Lux Cape here, in a lot of ways, is a red herring. So obviously, opponents that are aware of how powerful Torterra can be are going to be on the lookout for the Lux Cape. So I almost always attach to early game with the hopes of using that to bleed out a Field Blower, so that my other stadiums can stick or last longer, or that when I actually do get out the Floatstone and the Muscle Band, that they can persist. The Wishful Baton is like 50-50 on me, so sometimes it's really great to be able to drop those 2 energy back from a knocked out Pokemon to your bench, particularly if you're under the effect of a Hex Maniac, or if your opponent has cleverly gusted up and knocked out the Meganium, so that can put you in a tight spot. But it doesn't always trigger, and sometimes it's a very clear Field Blower target, which is kind of a bummer, but that's how the game plays. Okay, so that's kind of the core here with the deck. How did it do? The first game here in the actual pre-registered buy-in was against Lightning. It was a Lightning spread deck. I had a very slow start. I was able to get a couple of my Pokemon established, including the Toedscruel. The opposing player then did a Versus Seeker for Professor's Research, ripped that, used the cards there to get Zepstrika, ripped that, and then I was like, hey, wait a minute, you couldn't do the Versus Seeker because of the Toedscruel, and so that was kind of a bummer. So they, I said, don't worry about it. It's a friendly side event thing. Just keep playing. But they were like, no, we'll get a judge and get an official ruling. The judge said that that's a game loss. I'm counting that as a loss because I said, don't worry about it. Let's just keep playing the game. And ultimately, I misplayed it myself, not in a rule-breaking way, but I had my choice, I think, of either a Lily or an Iono or playing the Dawn, and the Dawn would have critically let me set up the Rillaboom, and that would have been a huge jump in the hit points from the Thwackey to the Rillaboom, going from 90 hit points up to 170, and so that would have let it live longer in the spread format. In addition to that, it would have let me accelerate some critical energy. I was hoping off whichever shuffle draw supporter I had, I would be able to get one of this bajillion or Pokemon search, between Evo Soda or I guess Rizzo wouldn't have been there, but Turffield Stadium, Evolution Incense, Pokepad, Bug Catching Set, you can kind of go Evos, yeah, so there's a whole bunch of search in here to be able to find that Rillaboom or finding the Rillaboom naturally, and I failed that search, and that made me feel real bad, and then I was like, man, I should have just dawned for it. I knew it was in the deck. If I would have dawned for it, I would have been cranking. Anyway, the player ended up actually beating this, and so even though it went on the books as a win for the grass deck because of the misplay with the Versus Seeker and the Toedscruel Slime Mold Colony, I'm personally counting that as a loss. And so I appreciate that person's, willingness to reach out to the judge. I was cool with it playing it, but, if they feel better being honest about it, I'm not gonna worry too much. So my round 2 was against a low tide water matchup, and that matchup felt a little lopsided, partially because I had a pretty good fire start, so I was able to, I think, Arvin for Buddy Poffin on my first turn. They had a little bit of a slower start. I kept looking for them to put the whale out, but their first 2 attacking turns, which I guess would have been their first turn and their second turn, both were to gather the crew, and they were kind of bricked out. After the game, so my second turn, which would have been the third game turn, I believe I Marnied, and they were like, yeah, that really set me back. And then the next turn after that, I used N to continue to fill up my deck, and the N is a really nice mid-game or late game. It can be used either way, but one thing that's nice about this grass deck is once you start pulling Pokemon out, and once you start burning Pokemon search items, and once you use that voltage beat once or twice to pull some energy out of the deck, there's not a whole lot left in the deck other than tools, recovery, and supporters, and so it feels really good mid to late game, assuming you can get established, and that definitely was the case here. So once I had after you've established your board state, the Grottle can easily evolve into the Torterra and keep cracking. The really nice thing about the low tide water deck is if it fires, it can do a lot of damage very early on. The downside with it is it doesn't have a way to do a 190 damage. So, a lot of those Pokemon damage were capped at 120 with the Inteleon. I think it's 140 with the Starmie or the Misty Starmie, and the Palafin is 130, and so there's a lot of damage there, but none of them were able to knock this guy out. So once I got him going, it was just like boom boom, and then eventually they knocked out Torterra, but by that time I was able to establish the Type of Blue. I had Toedscruel going, and it was just kind of snowballed downhill from there. The third game in the pre-buy-in was against a Lost Zone Psychic, and so that one was a really tight game. The problem with that matchup, and as soon as I put the Toedscruel down, my opponent was like, I am cooked. But unfortunately for me, this little dude didn't show up for work. It was in the prizes, and I couldn't access it the whole game. And by the time I found redeemable ticket, it was too late. So I was able to establish my board game, but a couple of the early game ticks of damage onto the Rillaboom that dropped from 170 hit points down to that 20 range made him an easy target later game, and even the Meganium then eventually fell. And so by the time this was all cooking, I lost by 1 prize in a very tight game to Lost Zone Psychic, and I think that game would have been completely different if Toad School was actually in my deck, because I would have established that very early on and prevented, 100% of the recovery and recycle that deck is dependent on to get that Sableye, back and back and back and back and back. They were able to additionally use the Bucephalon at the right time, and they actually did have Iron Boulder in that deck, which was critical late game to be able to hand match size. So there was a late game Iono where we both had 2, and then it was just a straight match with Iron Boulder. So I lost ultimately to Lost Zone Psychic in what I thought was a very good game, but unfortunately one where I couldn't pull it out, and I was really missing what would be my MVP of the whole day. Over here. So then moving into the round robin, the good news is the first round was grass on grass, and my opponent had what I thought was a very clever bug themed grass deck where the Butterfree was able to roll dice with the Trick Coin attack, which had the paralysis, and so they were actually able to paralyze the Torterra by the time I got that established. And unfortunately I could not find my escape rope, and if you're paralyzed in this deck other than Birdkeeper and escape rope, there's not a whole lot more I can do about it other than say thank you, have a good game. But thankfully they, again, even though I warned them about the slime mold ability when they used their La Perfume Roserade, what they went to go get was actually a Lanazade, and then they went to pull it back from the discard pile, and I got to be like, no, you can't, that's direct from discard to hand, so Lanazade doesn't work. And by that point they had already reshuffled their deck, and it reestablished a couple of other game actions before they went to Lanazade, so it wasn't easily reversible. The last then, so the next game was against a Fairy control deck, and I really want to give it out to Lynn, who I think plays at Good Games in Chicago. Lynn showed up to a couple of the Gym Leader Challenge events today and yesterday, and today was cranking Fairy Control. That's a very challenging deck to try to build and make work. And the rule number 1 when facing something that you think could be control or that smells like it is control is don't overbench. And so I conscientiously did not put out more Pokemon than I needed. I put out the Toad School partially because this was my start game basic, was the Toad School, but also because this thing shuts down all of the ways to get those control cards back from the discard pile into hand. And then I just basically wrecked the day with Torterra. So I think I only had 3 Pokemon in play. It was Torterra, Toad School, and I think I've attached or set up Rillaboom so that I could accelerate the energy, so that if I needed to, I could use the Hammer In attack or the Evo Press, or if they attempted to pin me in the active, I could always attach from deck using that Voltage Beat and then just manually retreat. And so that was kind of the angle there. And so really with only 3 Pokemon in play, I never really established or put any more in the game than that, and I was able to take the knockouts that I needed to. It helped that on their protection cottony attacks when they were rolling, they all came up tails for a couple times in a row. The last matchup of the day, the 6th and final match, was against a Psychic deck that had Blindside. So this was the standard Xatu TM Blindside build that we've all seen, known, and come to love. I did really good early game, so I was actually up by a prize throughout most of it. The downside was they were able to ping enough damage over to both the Rillaboom and to the Torterra, where the 160 slice from the Glade was able to cut through it. A very well-timed Parallel City made me choose between discarding a recently recovered Grotto line from hand. So I had already at that point used most of my card recovery, and honestly I think I misplayed or misprioritized which cards to bring back from discard pile to keep the game going. But eventually they were able to play Parallel City, and then after I discarded, they immediately played Guzma, and that pulled up my Meganium. They knocked out my Meganium with the Glade Swirling Slice, which does perfect math for the 160, and that left me without any evolution Pokemon on the board. And unfortunately it left me without the evolution Pokemon and without the energy acceleration from the Meganium, and so then the Torterra was really underperforming and was not doing what it needed to, and that gave them the critical turn to set up for the TM Blindside. And the TM Blindside then was able to knock out a Shaman, which I was hoping to revenge attack with the following turn. But again, the Devo, accelerate from Xatu, accelerate from Malamar, attach from hand for turn, TM Devo, retreat, and attack with the TM Blindside was very well timed to take the whole day. So ultimately, this deck I think did pretty nice. I'm not going to complain about it. You know, this is my badge winning deck from the local league here at Atomic Comic Planet, and it did really nice with Toad School. I think a lot of it synergizes. The hiccup when I've lost with this deck is I always feel like it's one turn too late and it just doesn't quite have like the recovery. So either it dominates early and by the mid game it's just a snowball effect downhill, or it struggles to get set up and peters out from gas and then ends up losing. And you know, I think that's probably where grass is at in the meta overall. But I do want to give a shout out to all the people that were kind enough to play some games with me today at the Indianapolis Regional. Please go ahead and give 2 thumbs up to this video. Smash that subscribe button down below. Draft a comment down for what you think might be changed or what some, you know, interesting tweaks could be on this deck. Obviously, there's an outrageous amount of Pokemon search in the deck, and that's really what it's all predicated on. And so with that, thanks for paying attention.